Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So we have another one out of Yahoo. Um, Most times when they do these type of videos about the life expectancy, it always is a specific area, neighborhood, or group. But this one pretty much sums up the U.S. And it says the U.S. life expectancy drops again as overdoses climb. And so this is US as a whole. So this is a little more broader and not as narrow. And so I want to take you back to where I was about the US life expectancy. Okay, let's see. Pretty sad because, there's so many things that are going on in the world where they have issues with drug addiction. And drugs have been a big key factor. You see, there's other issues, of course, but drugs have been a big key factor in what has gone on with the life expectancy of U.S. citizens. So, U.S. Okay, so I usually like to look at all of the different articles, and sometimes one article might have a little more detail than others. So we are losing too many Americans. Suicides and drug overdoses push down U.S. life expectancy. Drug and suicide deaths rise as U.S. life expectancy drops. U.S. life expectancy declines again, a dismal trend not seen since World War One. So we have it out of the Washington Post, out of BBC.com, and USA Today. And so it's pretty grim, but it's true. And it says more for the U.S. life expectancy of 2018. And so see it here. Okay. So I'm looking at Bloomberg Economics. And so this is by Alexandre Tanzi. American life expectancy falls again as opioid deaths disease rise. So I'm going to go into several of these because this is now being called a disease, and it is plaguing a lot of Americans. So deaths from drug overdoses top 70,000. Suicide rate is up to 3.7%, and 10 leading causes of death remain the same last year. U.S. life expectancy has fallen again, according to the Center for Disease Control report on 2017 deaths. The decline is driven by an increase of deaths from drug overdoses, suicides, diabetes, and the influenza, surprisingly, and pneumonia. Overall, heart disease and cancer remain the two leading causes of death. And it says unintentional injuries, a category that includes drug overdoses, is the third leading cause of death. So in 2017, a total of 2,813, well, actually, it's more than 2,000, it's 2,800,013,503 resident deaths were registered in the U.S. So the leading causes of death, the top 10 account for about 3/4 of the total in the U.S. So in 2016, you see it is in black. And in 2017, you see it is in like a reddish or a pink. And so they have heart disease, cancer, unintentional injuries, chronic lower respiratory disease, stroke, Alzheimer. Heart disease seems to be the two highest: heart disease and cancer and unintentional injuries. And so in the lower half is stroke, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, influenza, pneumonia, kidney disease, and suicide. Okay, so a baby born in 2017 can expect to live 78.6 years, which was down from 78.7 years in 2016. So the life expectancy for a female born in 2017 is 81.1, 5 years longer than males. U.S. life expectancy at birth. So for both sexes, you see there is a graph that is here. So in 2017, they have for both sexes 78.6, and for 2016 is 78.7. So you see the change. For males is 76.1, and in 2016 is 76.2. For females in 2017 is 8 to 81.1 in terms of life expectancy at birth, and in 2016 is 81.1. So in 2017, 65-year-old males were projected to live another 18.1 years and females 20.6 more. So these figures are unchanged. 2016 estimates. So age adjusted death rates increased for non-Hispanic whites, males, females, and black males. The rates decreased for non-Hispanic black females, and drug overdose deaths in 2017. There were 70,237 drug overdose deaths in the U.S., an increase of 9.6% from a year earlier. Overdose deaths rates were highest in the West Virginia area, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. So this is where most of the drug deaths are the highest. So deaths from synthetic opioids such as fentanyl and other methadone rose 45% between 2016 to 2017. So the rate of drug overdose deaths involving synthetic opioids other than methadone is up 30-fold from 1999. Drug overdose deaths rates by age group. Overdose death rates among ages 25 to 34 years old up more than fivefold from 1999. So they have a graph here, and you can see it. So suicides, 1999 through 2017, the age-adjusted suicide rate increased 33% from 10.5 to 14.0.
Time to look at scam. It's a different type of company. Numbers are the most important thing. It's not about the bottom line. It's about what's right, from the phone call to the help, the service, the benefits.
You can hear my you can hear another system. So sorry about that. So it goes on to read that in 2017 there was a 53% higher than the comparable rate to 1999. Overall suicide rose to about 47,173 in 2017, and from 44,965 a year earlier. Those were commercial. Okay, so then we have on the rise. What is on the rise in the U.S. is suicide rates, which is lowest in the most urbanized areas. So in 1999, you see it here: central, metro, most urban areas. So in 2017, it was 11.1. That's the U.S. suicide rate. But from 1999, it was 9.6. So it's high, a little bit higher now. And so it goes into the details, and you can see the graph for yourselves. And so the suicide rate for females increased 53% from 1999 to 2017, increasing on an average of 3% per year over the last decade. In the males, this change has been smaller, but the suicide rate itself is almost 4 times greater than that of for females. So suicide became the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 34 years of age in 2016. And so that's pretty much the article. It's very short and simple to the point. It has some really strong graphs that pretty much give you an estimatum of what, like a roundabout number in terms of statistics of who is, you know, falls, why the life expectancy falls again as opioid death and disease rise. Okay, so it talks a lot about the drugs and that having to be, seems like a strong indicator as to why we have these issues. And so they give some really great statistics. So now I'm going to go into this one. U.S. life expectancy declines again, a dismal trend not seen since World War One. Now I'm looking at what I had because I had another article where it says U.S. life expectancy drops again as overdoses. Okay, so it probably comes up, but I'm gonna look at this one when it talks about World War One. Because it'll probably go into detail about that. So the U.S. life expectancy declines again, a dismal trend not seen since World War One. And so you see it here. There's random ads and what have you, so excuse me for that. But this one is by Lenny Bernstein, November 29, 12:01 a.m. Life expectancy in the U.S. declined again in 2017, the government said Thursday in a bleak series of reports that showed a nation still in the grip of escalating drug and suicide crises. So the data continued the longest sustained decline in the expected lifespan at the birth in a century, and appalling performance not seen in the U.S. or United States since 1915 through the 1918s. So that 4-year period included World War One and the flu pandemic that killed 675,000 people in the U.S. and perhaps about 50 million worldwide. So public health and demographic experts reacted with an alarm to the release of the Center, or the CDC, which is a Center for Disease Control and Prevention annual statistics, which are considered a reliable barometer of a society's health. So in the most developed nations, which would be the US is one of them, life expectancy has marched steadily upward for decades. Okay, so I think this is a very dismal picture of health in the United States, said Joshua M. Sharfstein, Vice Dean for the Public Health Practice and Community Engagement at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Life expectancy is improving in many places in the world, but it shouldn't be declining in the U.S. So in the U.S. it's declining, but in other places it's doing a little better than the U.S., which is sad. But look at all of the strife and all of the racism and all the hate and all the stuff that is going on, the chaos and what have you, and some of these jobs and the capitalism that's killing people emotionally and financially. So after 3 years of stagnation and decline, what do we do now? As SV Subramanian, a professor of population health and geography at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, do we say this is the new normal, or can we say that this is a tractable problem? Okay, overall, Americans could expect to live about 78 years, 0.6 years at birth in 2017, down a tenth of a year from the 2016 estimate. According to the CDC's National Center for Health Statistics, men could anticipate a lifespan of 76.1 years, down a tenth of a year from 2016. Life expectancy for women in 2017 was 81.1 years, unchanged. So that pretty much validates what I said from the first article unchanged from the previous year. So drug overdoses, which seems to be the strong indicator, it's set another annual record in 2017, cresting at 70,237 and up to 63,632 the year before, the government said in a companion report. Okay, the opioid epidemic continued to take a relentless toll on 47,600 deaths in 2017 from drugs sold on the streets such as fentanyl and heroin, as well as the prescription narcotics as well. And so Joel O'Lear takes care of the grounds at the Spring Hill Cemetery in Charleston, West Virginia, and the state's led nation of overdose deaths in 2017. And so you can see where most of the grave site areas, they're showing that it's just building up. So it says that the opioid epidemic continued to take a relentless toll with 47,600 deaths in 2017 from drugs sold on the street, such as fentanyl and heroin, as well as prescription narcotics, and that was also a record number driven largely by the increase of fentanyl deaths. And so since 1999, the number of drug overdose deaths has more than quadrupled. So deaths attributed to opioids were nearly 6 times greater in 2017 than they were in 1999. So deaths from legal painkillers, these are legal painkillers, did not increase in 2017. So there were 14,495 overdose drug deaths attributed to narcotics such as oxycodone and the hydrocodone, and that is 3,194 from methadone, which is used as a painkiller. So those totals were virtually identical to the numbers in 2016. So the number of heroin deaths was 15,482, also did not rise from the previous year. So Robert Anderson, chief of the Mortality Statistics Branch of the Center for the Health Statistics, said that leveling off the prescription drug deaths may reflect a small impact from the efforts in recent years to curb the diversion of legal painkillers to users and dealers on the street. Those measures include prescription drug monitoring programs that help prevent substance abusers from obtaining multiple prescriptions by doctor shopping. So others noted programs such that may help also have helped the overdose antidote, which is called naloxone, has made more widely available in many places. Rhode Island has made efforts to educate substance abusers as they leave the jails, and a time when they are particularly vulnerable to overdose, and the Vermont and other states have bolstered treatment programs. So, that's costing a lot of money for taxpayers. So states that have expanded their Medicaid programs are also able to offer more treatment for users. So rates of suicide and drug overdose have climbed or continued to climb. And you see it here. There's suicides, and you see it has climbed 22.4%, and drug overdose deaths 29.1%. So it even gives a breakdown of the males. So that was the males. For females is 6.1, and for females in 2017, from 1999 to 2017, is in suicide is 6.1 for females, and for males is 17.8 to 22.4 in the males in suicides. Okay, so for drug overdoses in the males is 8.2 on up to 29.1. For the females is 3.9 on up to 14.4. So you see when it rises up, that means that the percentage is getting higher for people that are dying of these diseases or these issues. Anderson said provisional data for the first 4 months of 2018 show a plateau and possibly a small decline in the drug overdose deaths. But Steen, a former Secretary of the Health in Maryland, said that the heroin numbers reveal that fentanyl is pushing the drug out of the illicit market in some other places. So the opioid market has been completely taken over by fentanyl, Sharfstein said. So fentanyl is extremely deadly. There's nothing good about it, period. Only a small amount can kill you. You don't have to have very much of that. So, indeed, the new data shows that illicit fentanyl related deaths surged again 19,413 in 2016 and to now of 2017, or well, now it's 2018, but in 2017 it was up to 28,466 in 2017, so it's probably a lot higher right now, 2018. So as large as it was, the 47% increase was smaller than the jump between 2015 and 2016. So when the number of deaths of fentanyl and its analogs more than doubled, the total number of opioid deaths is smaller than the sum of the categories because some people die with multiple drugs in their system. And we've seen that in most of the entertainers. Recently, they have had deaths that have happened from just a small amount. And sometimes they're taking painkillers, things that have been prescribed to them. They take a double dose or triple dose. And a lot of them have been hospitalized or it's too late to hospitalize them, they're dead. And so the geographic disparities in the overdose deaths continued in 2017. West Virginia again led the nation with 57.8% of deaths, which is 100,000 people. Okay, followed by the Ohio, Pennsylvania, and the District of Columbia, Nebraska, by contrast, had just 8.1 drug overdose deaths per 100,000 residents. So other factors in the life expectancy decline include the spike in deaths from flus. And so we've had issues with flus and pneumonias. Last winter, the increase in the deaths of chronic lower respiratory disease, Alzheimer's disease, strokes, and suicide deaths from heart disease is the number one killer of Americans, which had been declining until 2011, and it continued to level off. So deaths from cancer continue their long, steady downward trend. CDC issued its health statistic report in December. Each December they issue it. So in 2017, report of the third in a row to show a decline in life expectancy. So nearly a year later, the agency combines each year's data with additional information from Medicare. And so in the last 2 years, that has resulted in a tiny adjustment to the overall life expectancy number. By the revised measure, life expectancy in 2015 2016 was flat at 78.7% and a decline from 78.9% in 2014. So any revision from 2017 estimates at 78.6% years will come the next year. So a third report of the government detailed the ongoing growth deaths of from the suicide, which has climbed steadily since 1999, but grown worse since 2006. So most notable is the widening gap between urban and rural Americans. So suicide rates in the most rural countries or counties are now nearly double those in the most urban counties. So overall suicide increased by a third from 1999 to 2017, and reports showed that the urban America the rate is 11.1 per 100,000 people. And so in the most rural parts of the country, it is 20 per 100,000 residents or people. So a variety of factors determine suicide rates, but one that may help explain the greater prevalence in the rural areas is the access to guns, said Keith Murphrys, a professor that is, of psychiatry and the behavioral sciences at Stanford University. So guns is coming into play because we do have a lot of guns in the U.S. And so they're in other places too, but they're very readily accessible. we've had a lot of mass shootings, and that seems to be a ugly trend that never ends. It only gets worse. And when we have these rules that are placed, or people talking about how they want to do away with guns, we seem to have an increase of mass shootings. So higher suicide rates in rural areas are due to the nearly 60% of rural homes having guns versus less than half of the homes in the urban areas. And so Humphrey wrote in an email, having easily available lethal means is a big risk factor for suicide. So Sharfstein said that the most lamentable aspect of the crisis is that policymakers know which approaches make a difference, such as medically assisted treatment for drug abusers and increased availability of mental health services in the states where they are lacking. So the frustration of many of us that we feel is that there is things that could save many lives, he said, and we're falling to, or we're failing rather to make those services available. And so this is pretty much the article in a nutshell. And so I thought it was interesting because it talks about the life expectancy and males and females and rural areas versus areas that are urbanized areas. And, it talks about the opioid deaths, it talks about other deaths, other things that you wouldn't probably necessarily consider as a reason for the decline in life expectancy. And so, with that being said, what do you think about that? Because I noticed that when people talk about the life expectancy in many of their videos, they attribute it to just one group or one culture of people, but this affects everyone in some shape, form, or fashion. And so we have several articles here that talk about it. And so the most recent article says that drug and suicide deaths rise as U.S. life expectancy drops. And so this is another article that also shed some light, which is BBC.com, that shed some light about this issue as well. We also have it in USA Today. And so it is a big growing problem. So drug and suicide deaths rise as U.S. life expectancy drops. And so this is US and Canada. And so the rising suicide and overdose rates, according to the new government reports. So for the Center for Disease Control found nearly 70,000 more Americans died in 2017 than in 2016, with the rising rates of death among ages 20 to 44-year-olds. Thursday's report revealed synthetic opioid-related overdose deaths rates rose by 45% on average nationwide. So the suicide rate is also the highest it has ever been in decades. Americans can expect to live just over 78 years of age and 6 months on average. And so a zero point 0.1 year drop from 2016, according to the report released on Thursday. So tragically, this troubling trend is largely driven by the deaths of drug overdose and suicide. So the Center for Disease Control Director Robert Redfield, in a statement, life expectancy gives us a snapshot of the nation's overall health, and these sobering statistics are a wake-up call that we are losing too many Americans too early and too often to conditions that are preventable. The top 10 leading causes of death, including heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, and suicide, were the same as in 2016, accounting for the majority of deaths. So only cancer deaths rates decreased by 2.1%, while the rates for most other causes increase. U.S. women continue to outlive men, and the death rate did decrease among 45 years of age to about 54 years old. So between 2016 and 2017, mortality rates also decreased for Black women. Okay, and so there was no significant change in the rates for Black men and Hispanic Americans. So while the U.S. These are other related articles. Why U.S. suicide rate is on the rise. These are related articles. Americans should get active by age 3. Okay. Do we really live longer than our ancestors? So life expectancy continues. Life expectancy in the US began dropping in 2015. So Monaco and Japan currently have the longest life expectancies in the world at 89 to 85 years. And so the UK's life expectancy is around 80 years. And so this actually brings into play of other places and other countries. So drug death rates is 16% per year. So as the U.S. grapples with the opioid crisis, overdoses claim more and more lives. The CDC has reported and found the age-adjusted death rate has gone up 16% per year since 2014, and drug overdose deaths accounted for 70,237 deaths last year, nearly 10% higher than 2016. So, with a significantly higher rate of death among men compared to women, the death rate from the overdoses caused by synthetic opioid like fentanyl increased by 45% in 1 year. West Virginia is always on the map. You notice that? Saw the highest overdose death rates in 2017 at 58 per 100,000 people. Ohio, Pennsylvania, and the U.S. Capitol also topped the list. Okay, so steady increase in suicide. So CDC also has found that suicide became the second leading cause of death from ages 10 on up to 34 years old in 2016, with the rates increasing 33% between 1999 and 2017, according to the report. Urban area suicide rates were 16% higher in 2017 than in 1999, and the rural area suicides increased by 53% the same time period. So mental illness also, it doesn't discriminate. You could be any race, color, creed, gender, whatever background, religion, whatever you believe in, and you can still have issues with mental illness. So it doesn't discriminate. So that's a related article. Dr. Jerry Reed from the National Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention told the BBC that the suicide is not always just a mental health challenge. So economic conditions of or livelihood opportunities in decline could lead people to positions where they are at risk. So we need to intervene in both mental and public health cases, Dr. Reed has said. And so that's bulleted. Mental illness doesn't discriminate. So sometimes it can not even be mental illness, it could be the stressors of life, economic conditions, conditions of livelihood, opportunities in and decline could lead people into this area. So, where to get help from Canada or the US? If you're in an emergency, please, they stress to call 911. You can contact the U.S. National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is a 1-800 number 273-8255, or the crisis test line, texting home to 741741. Young people in need of help can call Kids Help Phone, which is 1-800-668-6868. If you're in the UK, you can call the Samaritans on 116123. And so this is the related article right here. It talks about a lot of the deaths. And it seems to be that the drug overdoses, suicide, and cancer seem to top the charts. So what are your thoughts on that? Because opioids has been a huge problem. They put a lot of money. I've heard Donald Trump talking about that, it's a crisis, but it seems like every effort that they're making to try to combat it is not really working. And so that's why they have put out these articles about Americans. And you notice that article mentioned economic despair. It talks about how people are being treated because capitalism has been killing people as well. When you can't afford to live somewhere, you can't even live, and you can't feed your family, and you don't have anywhere to stay, and you're homeless, the rising rates of homelessness, and you see all these makeshift tents in areas that have been gentrified, that also causes people and pulls them out of their safety zone, and they feel uncomfortable and they feel like they have to, it's fight or flight. And so it draws them into this lifestyle of let's do what we can to feed our families. And it could be a life of crime, it could be desperation, it could be taking jobs that you normally wouldn't take that may be risque. You could also end up putting yourself in more harm's way because you're exposing yourself to vices, and you're exposing yourself to an atmosphere that you're not really used to, or that is not something that is common to you. And then if you have been to school and if you have a set of skills, but you're not being acknowledged for it, and you're being demoted, or you're being treated marginally, marginalized because of your race, because of your gender, or because of your beliefs and what have you, it puts you in another perspective. And so mentally it can be draining. And so these are the things that happen to people that can cause them to spin out of control and could cause suicide deaths. And so this probably explains the reason why we have so many of these things happening. And it all connects, because a lot of times people, sometimes they're searching for a way out to escape some of the stresses of life, and so they end up going into drug addiction, looking for ways out. Or maybe they're working jobs where they're experiencing a lot of injuries and pain. So then they go and get prescription drugs, and those drugs could possibly well be opioids. And so this could also put them in that category for death. Um, and so we have a real growing problem here in the US, people. And so a lot of people are not really, there's some people talking about, but not enough. And so when you have put pressure on people to spend a lot of money that they can't afford, or you put pressure on people to perform a particular way and they're not the same culture, the same background, you put pressure on people to assimilate to something that they're normally not accustomed to, a lifestyle which they can't achieve because they don't make that type of money or income, it can send people into any of these categories. What's your thoughts, your feedback, and comments on this? So I'm going to end it right here. This one was out of the Washington Post on health and science. U.S. life expectancy declines again, a dismal trend not seen since World War One. And now we also have places that are offering flu shots free of charge, because the flu has been very prevalent lately, in California especially. So I don't know if anywhere else have you heard that, but I know that they had a little commercial stating that they were offering flu shots to people free here in California because they had such a big problem with it. And so they were worried that more people were going to end up contracting the flu and dying of it. And so a lot of times every year, what they do is they try to get people to go out and get inoculated or get vaccinated. And we've had people who don't want to choose the vaccination shots because they're afraid that that might escalate a pre-existing illness, or it may add something to their body that isn't needed. So there's fear. Some people have a fear of getting vaccinations because they fear that some of what they're putting in people may cause their premature death. Your thoughts, your feedback, your comment? Thanks for listening.